How many times do we hear community members quote Jane Jacobs' theories in order to object a development proposal? But not only them, our planning system entirely based on so many of Jane Jacobs' theories and notions, such as local empowerment, open houses, community adjustments, community engagement, and so on. And generally getting your voice heard against undesirable change in your neighborhood. The question is, what is this undesirable change? But we need to realize that her ideas and the way they were interpreted are not the solutions to the problems we're facing today, including the affordability crisis. So let's have a closer look. Jane Jacobs is still considered to be one of the most influencing urban planning thought leaders of all times. She fought against urban renewal and slum clearance in the 50s and 60s in New York that were led by Robert Moses. Her book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities from 1961, is still read and studied in urban planning and architecture schools. We need to remember that when Jacob was active, downtown cores were basically abandoned and by people seeking the quiet and space of the suburbs. In these days, we don't really need to convince anyone that downtowns are the place to be. The Manhattan district that Jane Jacobs fought to preserve are now one of the most expensive real estate in the world. And again, she was a big believer in the inner cities and in the neighborhoods in a time where everyone was just fleeing to the suburbs. So she had to advocate for that. A concept that today we practically take for granted. In many of Jacob's fights, she was fighting against change that will dramatically influence the neighborhoods. But Jane Jacobs wasn't necessarily against change. On page 150 of her book, Death and Life of Great American Cities from 1961, she lists 4 conditions for any part of a city to generate exuberant diversity. That districts have a mix of primary uses, that most blocks be short, that buildings be of various ages, and that the area have sufficient density. Surprising, right? Jacob also said that in the absence of a pedestrian scale, density can be a big trouble, which I totally agree with. But urban design came such a long way, and I'm not arguing. A lot of it is thanks to influencers like Jane Jacobs. But the point is, we are not facing the same urban design principles as she did. We know much better today. We already know the importance of mix of uses, the design of the ground floor as a tool to achieve vibrant cities, the concept of eyes on the street, the importance of narrow streets, heritage, wide sidewalks, and the list goes on and on. Nowadays, many NIMBYs use Jane Jacobs theories to build their argument. NIMBYs often think that any change means a bad change, but this is absolutely not what she meant. To conclude, in 2021, when we are facing a severe housing affordability crisis, we need to be critical of the tools we choose to stick to in planning and building Toronto. And not every change is a bad change. And change, in fact, is necessary to address Toronto's issues in 2021.